Oh, it's so great to have spring and summer back, and all the fruits and vegetables are growing, and all the flowers are flowering. And, well, I'm getting carried away, but that's okay. I'm going to now talk with a lovely lady. Her name is Celeste Longacre, and she's got a book called Celeste's Garden Delights. Discover the many ways a garden can nurture you. You couldn't have come along at a better time, Celeste.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being here. And you also have a kind of a neat job. We'll talk about this in a bit. You work with is it the Farmer's Almanac?
The old Farmer's Almanac.
Oh, the old one, of course, the only one. And what do you do for them?
I do their astrology.
All right, more on that in a minute, okay? Hold that right there. But this is all about gardening, and actually it's all about canning and preserving and enjoying the fruits and vegetables of the garden. And New England is a hotbed for this, isn't it?
It is, yes, it really is. I think Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire are number one for supporting local farmers.
They are indeed. Right. We
Yeah.
got these community farms now. You can buy all kinds of produce in big boxes once a week or once a month. It's great. So tell me a little bit about the ease of doing this. I think many people, myself included, think, oh my God, there's so much work involved, and we want to put things away, store them, can them, jar them.
Well, it is a little bit of effort, but it really, like I have told people before, when I make my spaghetti sauce, that's an all-day event. But I will end up with 18 quarts of spaghetti sauce, which is another 18 days when I have something that I can just heat and eat. So even though it's a day-long process, it's definitely worth it.
So if someone wants to start, beginner, let's say, do they have to? Well, first of all, they don't have to necessarily have their own garden to do this, but it makes sense. What's a good beginner's plan for me?
Well, a good beginner's plan, I think, is to start small. You want to just have whatever couple of vegetables you really like, just to sort of get your toe in the water and see if you like it. Because it's a certain kind of work, and if you don't enjoy it, you probably should just get your veggies at the farmer's market. But I would say do a small garden, and start, if tomatoes are your favorite thing, grow tomatoes. If summer squash is your favorite thing, grow summer squash. Maybe pick a couple of things, and read the garden journals or my book to see exactly how to do it. And then when things are really moving and coming in, you can experiment with putting some things in the freezer, or putting some things in jars, or drying some herbs, or my book even tells you how to build a root cellar and put stuff in.
Now, you've been doing this for a long time, living, as they say, sustainably. So tell me what your day is like and how much food on the table comes right from your own garden.
Well, most of the food on our table comes from our own garden, not necessarily all of it. But like today I got up and I went outside and I rescued my mint patch. This moss had kind of invaded it, so I spent a couple hours just getting the moss all out and feeding my mint patch and watering my mint patch. And then I went out and I picked 2 bags of asparagus and put them in the freezer.
That's great. And you have to know, obviously, when things are coming up, when they're ripe, when they're ready to pick. But that's not that hard, is it?
It's not hard at all, no. You get the gist of that pretty quickly. Tomatoes are ready when they're nice and red. And I think one thing about tomatoes is farmers can't afford to let them get super, super ripe, because when they're super, super ripe, they're very, very soft, and the first person that touches it is going to damage it. So if you've never grown your own tomatoes, growing your own tomatoes is a real treat, because you can let them get really, really ripe, and they're just so unbelievably delicious.
I know. I have friends who give me their tomatoes.
Oh, aren't you
and
lucky?
it's one of the great things. Talking with Celeste Longacre. Celeste's Garden Delights is her new book, all about sustaining yourself and having a great time doing it with delicious fruits and vegetables from your own garden. I'm always concerned or curious about things like pesticides and what kinds of minerals, things that we have to add to our local soil. And I know you have some tips on that as well.
Yeah, I think I always give my soil kelp meal and azomite powder. Those are things that have a lot of different minerals in them, so that I know if I put them into the soil, they'll be getting into the vegetables, and then they'll be getting into me. I think that our soils have been kind of demineralized over the past couple hundred years. Farmers have, especially since World War II, they've just been putting in NPK, which is 3 different things, and there's probably something like 80 different minerals that we need. So it's good to have compost and put different things in your soil. The very best thing to do is get your soil tested.
And who does that for
the local groups, the local conservation groups.
Okay.
And it's not expensive. I think the last time I had my soil tested, it was $17, which isn't too bad.
Gee whiz. And they'll tell you what's going on with the soil and perhaps what kinds of things you can add, natural things you can add that will enhance the growth.
Yeah, they'll tell you what you're deficient in. So you know, like they might say you're deficient in boron. That's something that most soils around here are in fact, all over the country, most soils are deficient in boron. So you would, get some borax, or not borax, the 20 multium stuff, and you could put that in your garden. Just very very small amount.
Simple
But
thing.
they'll tell you exactly what to put in, and they'll tell you exactly how much to put in. So it's worth it because you don't really know what's missing until you have your soil tested.
Celeste, do you have some tips on how to really keep the little bugaboos away? Because that's the problem for so many people. They wake up in the morning and, oh, my God, the insects have been all at it. I'm not talking about a deer and other wild animal. You can build a fence for that. But how do you keep the little buggies away?
There's different things you can do for specific insects. One of the things you can do, the cabbage maggot is this little green worm that just covers broccolis and cabbages and Brussels sprouts. And if you plant marigolds right in the bed with the cabbages and the Brussels sprouts, you really don't get hardly any of those little green worms. It's a white moth that flies around, and I think the smell of the marigolds sort of hides the smell of the broccoli and the cabbages, so they can't find them as easily. And then nasturtiums can be helpful to keep the cucumber beetle away. So I plant them right in the bed with the cucumbers.
So you plant other plants that will help the flowering or growing vegetables protection, right? Gives them protection from the insects.
Yep.
Great idea. Now, in terms of watering, we've had quite a winter, I know, but they're already talking about a water ban in some communities because that's the way the earth is. I mean, we use the water and it goes away and then we're back to another season. Overwatering seems to be a problem for many gardeners. What advice do you have there?
Well, what I do is I take a garden fork. And there's two different kinds of garden forks. There's one that just is a straight, looks like a kitchen fork. And then there's another one that has that 90-degree angle on it.
Uh-huh.
I prefer the ones that are straight, that look just like a kitchen fork. But the tines on it are probably 4 inches long. And what I do is I go out and I put the fork right into the bed and lift it back out. And if the fork comes out dry, you definitely need to water. Because sometimes it's dry on the top, but it's not dry a couple inches down. So if you put the fork in and it comes out and it's got all kinds of dirt attached to it, you probably don't need to water, except when you very first plant the seeds. Because when you very first plant your seeds are living in that top quarter inch of soil. So you do need to keep that wet.
So many great tips here. Celeste Longacre is my guest, and Celeste's Garden Delights is the book. Now, for people who have just a little spot of land, you have some information, and it's good information, that you can really do a lot with a small area. Because some people obviously live in apartments or condos or even small homes. So let's say I have a small patch. What can I do there? Can I get a garden to really give me what I need?
You can do a lot with a small patch. You can grow things vertically, so you can grow them up if you don't have a lot of space to grow, outwards. If you think about Europe, if you've ever been to Europe, they have these tiny little yards, and everybody's yard is just chock-a-block full of vegetables. They don't have grass over there, So I think if you're interested in growing things, even with a small space, you can definitely grow things. You can grow things in pots if you just have a balcony, as long as there's sun. Vegetables do need a good 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. So as long as you have sun, you can definitely grow things.
Boy, you really have the answers here. The book is beautiful, by the way. A lot of great pictures. And canning and storing vegetables and fruits. And then using things like potatoes. You say you've never met a potato you didn't like. Is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Oh. Me too. I love eating potatoes. I would imagine growing them is as much fun. So let me ask you about the astrology here. Old Farmer's Almanac, for the past 20 years, Celeste is the official astrologist. So you obviously have to do your work well in advance, take a look at the stars because the book comes out and there it is, right?
Right. I've already written the 2017 one.
How does that bode for most people? Do we have some good stuff ahead?
Well, what I do for the Old Farmer's Almanac is I do the chart that says, best day to cut hair for slow growth, best day to cut hair for fast growth, best days to plant above ground crops, below ground crops. So I'm really mostly looking at the moon and where the moon is because that's what that particular chart is based on.
Right.
So, the moon goes through the whole zodiac every 28 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it spends a little over 2 days in a sign. And the very best time to plant is when the moon is in the water signs. And then the next best is when they're in the earth signs.
What would just help me out here because I'm not as up on the astrology? Give me the water signs again.
Okay, the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces.
Okay. So that's the best time to plant.
The best time to plant, the very best time to plant. Like right now, I would say The 12th and the 13th would be really good days
Mm-hmm.
to plant below ground crops like
Mm-hmm.
beets and carrots.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 16th and the 17th would also be good days. And then the above ground plants could be planted on the 20th or the 21st or the 22nd before 5:42 p.m.
Oh, you have it down to an exact science
So I'm
almost.
looking at my astrological calendar.
Yeah.
Or the 25th or the 26th would also be good days. And then going into June, if you haven't planted your garden yet, a really good day for below ground crops would be the 8th or the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
And the best above ground crops would be the 17th and the 18th.
Well, it sounds great. I know the Old Farmer's Almanac is a standby for most of us in this business, and I've been getting my edition for the last 35 years, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. You have a website of your own you'd like to send out there?
Yeah, it's CelesteLongacre.com, and there is an E at the end of both of my names, so it's a little tricky.
Celeste with an E and Longacre, A-C-R-E at the end of Long. And it's called Celeste's Garden Delights. Discover the many ways a garden can nurture you. And there's nothing like fresh produce from a local garden. Absolutely. The salads don't taste any better than they do when they've got those tomatoes just picked. And I know that you've got a lot of fans out there who are going to be following your advice. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of it with me.
Well, thank you, Jordan, for having me.
A delight to meet you. Celeste Longacre and her delights in the garden. And aren't we just thrilled we're talking about this instead of snowplows? We'll be back much more straight ahead on The Jordan Rich Show.